So, the worst thing that any of us could think of actually happened this season. Arsenal won the Premier League. But it could have been a whole lot worse. But I want to talk today about Arsenal because for as much as no one can take the achievement away from them and Arteta, they were worthy champions and in the end they did win it convincingly. But how sustainable is this for Arsenal? We thought going into last season that there was an era of dominance incoming for Liverpool. They had won the league title and reinvested heavily in their squad, spending over £500 million. And in the end, Liverpool finished 5th, a full 25 points behind Arsenal. However, this was because of ageing players from the previous seasons, a lot of their signings not really working out, and the eventual sacking of manager Arne Slot. Now, Arsenal don't have some of those issues in the sense that most of their core good players are relatively young, still have massive parts of their career to go, and Arteta wasn't coming off his initial Premier League season. In fact, he's been here for quite a while now. But generally speaking, how sustainable actually are Arsenal? Now, when I say sustainable, I don't mean in terms of the financial sense. There's no worries about the club potentially going bust. But I mean sustainable in terms of winning. Now, Mikel Arteta was appointed as the Arsenal manager in December 2019. He had no previous managerial experience, only being on the coaching staff at Manchester City under Pep Guardiola. It was a bold move by Arsenal, but credit to them, they stuck with their man, they backed him, and eventually it ended up in a league title. Now, in his first season, Arteta, I'm going to say, fluked an FA Cup win. I can remember watching that game, and the refereeing was a bit dodgy, to say the least.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
But Arteta's teams that he had to deal with weren't great. This is a picture of Arteta's first ever starting 11 as Arsenal manager. And this is the picture of Arsenal's starting 11 that started the Champions League final. There's no arguing that this team is infinitely better. But let's talk about the wider context of Arteta's time at Arsenal before this Premier League win. Well, before the start of the season that just finished, Arsenal had finished second in the league 3 times runners-up to Manchester City. Arteta had been consistently building his team and improving it, spending a lot of money along the way. And during that time, he won absolutely nothing. This included across all domestic competitions and in Europe, absolutely nothing, even though he'd spent time managing in the Europa League as well, even going out in the round of 32 one year to Olympiacos. Going into this season, it was now or never. Arteta had to win something, and nothing was too small of a trophy. And to be fair to Arteta, he went for absolutely everything. The League Cup was the first trophy to be concluded of the 4 that was available to Arsenal, and Arteta lost that in the final to Manchester City. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. However, the next one to be concluded for Arsenal was the FA Cup, because Arsenal would go out in the quarter-final to Southampton. That result was very poor, and within the span of a few weeks, Arsenal's quadruple trophy charge had turned into, at best, a double. Now, as I said, to be fair to Arsenal and to be completely fair to Arteta, they did win the Premier League title. Thanks to this lot. See, Arsenal were known in previous seasons for having bottled the position that they were in, and once again, going into the latter stages of this season, Arsenal had an extremely healthy lead. And just like as they'd done in previous seasons, they started to bottle it. Manchester City ended up beating them, closing down points with games in hand, and it looked like it was going to be a shootout race for goal difference if the two teams won every game. But something happened in previous seasons that hadn't happened. After Arsenal had bottled their position at the top, Manchester City also bottled it. Arsenal won every remaining game and went on to win the league. So why are Arsenal so unsustainable? Well, there's 3 simple factors that make Arsenal good. Number 1, defensively, they are exceptional. Arteta's done this by buying every single centre-back on planet Earth, as well as, to his credit, developing Gabriel and Saliba into amazing centre-backs. Number 2 is luck. Any team that is even moderately successful, needs a bit of luck. However, particularly this season, Arsenal have crammed about 10 years worth of luck into one season. And the third and most important one is momentum. Momentum is the most important thing that a team can have in football. Great tactical analysis is one thing, a plethora of exceptional players, homegrown talents, world-class management, passionate fans, all of it can fall short to a team that has one thing, the momentum. And for years, Arsenal have had the momentum. To be fair to Arteta, all of these players buy in, all of the fans bought in. That kept the momentum there, because Arsenal had to win something and had to win something big, and they did. They won the Premier League. But how sustainable are these things? Well, Arteta can certainly continue to be a very, very clever defensive manager. Their luck has to run out eventually. Certainly they've experienced massive amounts of luck this season, in terms of, as I said, Manchester City and Pep Guardiola doing something they've never done before, bottling their own comeback. And even in the Champions League final, Arteta knew his team was no match for PSG, but a very fluky bounce in the 5th minute to give Kai Havertz a goal meant that they could cling on desperately for their lives for the remaining 85. Of course, PSG would go on to get a penalty late into the game and win it on penalties. But Arsenal were extremely lucky to have even made it that far. Their run in the tournament was shambolic. To be fair to them, they'd done amazing in the group stage, winning all 8 games. However, a round of 16 tie against a toothless Bayer Leverkusen was followed by a quarter-final tie against a bored Sporting Lisbon side, and then a semi-final against an Atletico team with a nosebleed being that high up in the competition.
All too easy.
So, if the momentum has been killed because Arsenal have finally peaked and their luck has ran out, what else is really giving any reason to doubt them? This happens to every team that wins anything, and it's not a surefire, confirmed thing that every team that becomes good immediately crashes back down to earth. Well, there's a few things. First things first, for as good as Arteta is at building a defensive team, he is shocking at building one going forward. Arteta has spent over €1 billion in his time at Arsenal, and some of the players he's bought for certain fees, going in terms of attacking players, are just atrocious. €75 million on Kai Havertz, €70 million on Eberechi Eze, €67 million on Victor Gyökeres, €56 million on Noni Madueke, €52 million on Gabriel Jesus. These are big fees, with all of these attacking players not really warranting anything. Of the ones who were still at the club this season, and the biggest new signing was expected to be Victor Gyökeres. A player who last season scored 54 goals in 52 games for Sporting Lisbon. Arsenal completely were warranted for spending that amount of money on him. However, for a team that won the Premier League and made a League Cup and Champions League final, Gyökeres was involved in 55 games but only hit the back of the net 21 times, with 3 of those being penalties. It's not an awful return, but you would certainly want more. And these stats can be seen even more in depth if you look into the league. Arsenal have had a strength, as I said, with the momentum of having a team where goals can come from anywhere, but teams have proven in the past that that is not sustainable. You need to have attacking talent that can consistently be an outlet for goals. In the league, Arsenal's top goal scorer was Victor Gyökeres. He scored 14 goals, which on paper isn't an amazing return, and it was certainly not anywhere near the top of the charts, with him being 13 goals off Erling Haaland. However, there was only 6 players who actually scored more goals than Victor Gyökeres in the Premier League, so for as much as it was underwhelming given what he was meant to put across, it wasn't catastrophic. However, Arsenal's second top goal scorer in the Premier League this season was a draw between Eberechi Eze and Bukayo Saka, both of them only having 7 goals apiece. 7 goals apiece equates to there being 34 players in the Premier League this season who scored more goals than either of them. In fact, you could technically and correctly say that Arsenal's second top goal scorer in the Premier League this season was joint 45th. Bukayo Saka, who's supposed to be Arsenal's star boy, scored as many goals this season as supposedly extremely underwhelming Phil Foden. In fact, here's some of the players who scored more goals than Saka this season. Nick Woltermad, Tierno Barry, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, Jadon Anthony, Raul Jimenez, Casemiro, Harry Wilson, Zian Fleming, Richarlison, Junior Coupe, Danny Welbeck. Now again, one of Arsenal's strengths is being a team where goals come from anywhere, which is a quality you want to have, but given how poor Arteta is at bringing in attacking players, you have to wonder how sustainable it is. Arsenal did have 18 players this season who were involved in Premier League goals, which is actually very good. However, only 5 players managed either or more than 5 goals. And that to me just doesn't seem sustainable. In a season where you've won the league, only having one player who can score more than 10 goals in a season isn't great. And when we look at some of the players who Arteta has in his front line, it really doesn't look for good readings. Victor Gyökeres has put out a decent outturn, but many fans have been saying the same thing. What is he actually good at? At Arsenal, he hasn't looked like a clinical finisher in the box. He hasn't looked like someone who's particularly comfortable dribbling the ball. He isn't overly fast, and I'm sorry, but he has a touch on par with Romelu Lukaku. Gyökeres is good at running into the channels and clearly does know where to be in the box enough to put out a decent return, but again, this is a striker who is supposed to be on par with Erling Haaland. Eberechi Eze looks like something Arteta does not know how to fit into his team. Certainly he won't feel comfortable taking a midfielder out that's part of his rock solid defence to enable a more fluid attack. Starboy Bukayo Saka's goal return is dropping year on year. He's 24 now, and across the last 2 seasons he's only scored 23 goals. In fact, this season where Arsenal have won the league has been Saka's lowest goal return since 2021. Saka was a player who was ran into the ground by Arsenal and England ever since he was a teenager. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in a similar position to Marcus Rashford in years to come. Leandro Trossard has always been a consistent measure of goals, if only he'd slept at any point in the last 6 months. But on a serious note, the winger is ageing and slowing down. Kai Havertz is a striker that I don't think anyone's ever had confidence in. Sure, he's good at popping up in big moments, but this is a striker who cost over €70 million, and there's been points in his Arsenal career where he's been tried to be brung in as a midfielder. Germany at one point even tried him at left back.
Yeah, you suck. You just fucking suck.
And then you once again look at, in my opinion, the worst culprit of them all, Noni Madueke. Someone who is the epitome of fake it till you make it. The winger only managed 4 goal involvements across the entire Premier League season, and now he's going to the World Cup, whilst the likes of Phil Foden and Cole Palmer sit at home. Now, Arsenal are willing to back Arteta and could definitely bring in some more attacking talent throughout the summer. But after 6 years, you would really hope that Arteta had that down to a T now. There's one more thing I want to talk about in terms of Arteta and Arsenal, and it's his usage of young players. Certainly there's been a lot of hype surrounded about Max Daumann, and I think this might be the first young player Arteta's had with tremendous talent that he might get right. He's done a lot of good for Saka's career, but again, as I mentioned, the winger is only 24 and has been ran into the ground. And I'm not sure how I see Saka's career progressing, as in my opinion, he is slowing down year on year. Whilst age and experience is having other elements of his game improve, the traditional winger is someone that I see leaving him. I certainly don't think we're going to see another 20 goal season ever again from Bukayo Saka. And as I mentioned, his output last season, even in a Premier League winning season, wasn't great. And certainly with other young players, Arteta doesn't look overly confident. Ethan Nwaneri seemed like he had an amazing ceiling and a great future at Arsenal. Now looks set to leave the club after being loaned to Marseille. And another amazing talent they have is Miles Lewis-Skelly, who whilst on paper his numbers look really good for Arsenal this season, he featured 36 times. When you look a little deeper into his numbers, it's not so great. He only started 5 games in the Premier League this season and accumulated only 700 minutes. A full 90 of those 700 coming in the final game of the season against Crystal Palace when Arsenal had already won the title. Now, of course, Lewis Skelly is only 19, Max Dowman is only 16. There is plenty of time for these players to improve and become more of a part of Arteta's plans. And as I've said, maybe Arteta's trying not to do what he'd done with Saka, play the youngsters constantly at too young of an age and run them into the ground, which to be honest would be refreshing to see from a manager. Because he done it so strongly with Saka, the question does have to be asked. So just to recap, I don't think Arsenal are an overly bad team. I'd be shocked if they finished any lower than 3rd at worst next season. Certainly Arteta has the possibility to go on and win more trophies and cement more of a legacy at Arsenal. But in my opinion, if the manager doesn't figure out how to get more goals out of his front line and get better in the transfer window, as well as come to a complete understanding of what he wants with his youth players, the 3 factors that have made Arsenal such a dangerous team, at least 2 of them will be very, very, very hard to keep going. So it will be interesting to see what actually happens with Arsenal in the future. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Am I being too cynical, or is there something more closer to look at with Arsenal here? Thank you to everyone who's made it this far into the video, and I will see everyone in the next.